Hi, this is Marcus Pulis, and again, this is Aquarian Anarchy, and today is going to be a me day. It's not like I've not done this before, but the last time I kind of just went into my background and those kinds of things. I didn't get into philosophy and what I actually believe. So today I'm going to talk about voluntary voodoo. Many people find the idea of anarchy to be scary, and even more people find the idea of voodoo to be even more scary. Neither one are. As control is employed onto people, they need to use fear to convince the masses that systems of belief that are not easily controlled are evil or bad. Now, at some point, I'm going to cover the idea of a devil, and I'm going to cover the idea of what that means and those kinds of things. But it is safe to say that anarchists and people who practice voodoo have been demonized by the church, by government. Right now in Haiti, the people are rising up again. I'm sure they'll be demonized, even though what they're rising up against is government corruption. There was a bunch of money that was supposed to go to the Haitian people, but instead went to the pockets of governments, as it almost always does. This is a scam between both churches. I'm not saying that some of these churches that go to Haiti and don't do good work. That certainly is the case in many occasions, but also on many occasions the church takes that money or uses a portion for whatever it is. But that's kind of distracting from the overall idea. I am a voluntarist, and I came to my ideas of voluntarism or anarchism through spirituality. And if you want to hear my background, you can go watch the video I did on my background, which I'll put a link in the bottom of this video. But what voluntary voodoo is it is an idea in my own head. It's no more than that. You might let's watch this video and go, you know what? I agree with that, and call yourself that too. I don't know. I don't care, because it's about the individual. It's about you, and it's about your path. Now, as I said, my spirituality has become impacted by the freedom movement and the ideas of self-ownership and those kinds of ideas. But my spirituality started a very long time ago. The major influences on what would become voluntary voodoo is started with Alexandrian witchcraft, a form of Wicca, a much more organized form of Wicca. It certainly recognizes a hierarchy and those kinds of ideas. But that was where I kind of had my infancy in really practicing an active spirituality or a magical spirituality, a spirituality where I felt encouraged to learn and develop and not just follow orders. And so that certainly led there. But so it's an influence, but it really isn't a large influence, and most of its influence on voluntary voodoo really is secondhand, because many of the actual influences came from places that influenced Alexandrian witchcraft. Those places are obviously voodoo. Looking back on my long career with magical ideas, I've got about 25 years of experience, and I mean experience. I've been actively practicing one spirituality or another, and when I say actively, I mean doing something, not just reading a bunch of books. Actively doing, because if you add that, I've been doing it about 35 years. I'm 44 years old. So anyhow, about 25 years. Of that 25 years, I made the realization today that 15 years of that, more than half of that time, I've been practicing one form or another of voodoo. And what that means can be traced down through a variety of sources. But my suggestion, if you want to understand voodoo as a whole, there are several good books. But the best book that I think that I've found, and what I practice is much more of a New Orleans brand, but this isn't. This is Haitian. Um, the best book I've seen is called Divine Horsemen by Maya Deren. And that book influenced me pretty extensively in the early days of me practicing voodoo, and I haven't found many of the Loa to be that different from the descriptions that she talks about. To define my terms, Loa are the voodoo gods or the voodoo spirits. So that's an influence. It cannot go a moment without mentioning Aleister Crowley. I was as you would know if you watched my video, I was a member of the OTO at, I think, 21. I did my first degree in the Minerval at 20, which is the entry degree. But I was active in the OTO for several years and read many things. I haven't read everything, but I've read many things by Crowley, and he influenced my philosophy, particularly the Book of the Law, but also The Vision and the Voice. His work with Enochian has influenced me as well. And my background in ceremonial magic, largely influenced by the Golden Dawn and by Crowley, certainly influenced my practice of voluntary voodoo. For one, because Crowley emphasizes in his particular practices the individual, and the individual is the unit of society. It isn't some group, it isn't some government or whatever. It is the individual, and moving towards that idea is certainly part of what I believe and what I do and the philosophy that I follow. But I also was influenced by those spirits that I called. And yes, I called, experienced, and talked to those spirits. You can take me on face value. You can think that I'm full of crap. I don't care. That's what happened. But I called a bunch of archangels using the Kabbalistic system, and I really called a lot of Enochian spirits and angels. And those spirits have massively influenced what I do. I have a page on Facebook that is dedicated to Enochian, although I don't do a lot with it anymore. And it was started by my wife. And it lists some of the influences. You can already see the influence of voodoo at that time, and when my wife and I were doing Enochian. But so that's a major influence. Also influenced was I started reading with my studies into voluntarism and libertarianism and those kinds of thoughts. I studied many of the old founding fathers and found that many of them are deists, and so I wanted to know what that meant. So I studied a lot of people, and probably the most influential was Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine's deism in his ideas that God is not massively involved in our life rang true to me. And so his book called Age of Reason is his primary book on deism, and it's excellent. And if you have any doubts about the lack of basis in actual events of the Bible, Age of Reason will certainly prove that to you. And it's not that he really sought to initially disprove those things, but kind of winds up doing it because of the actions of the Christians who attacked him, and Benjamin Franklin told him that they would, who was also a deist. So deism has a massive impact on my beliefs as well. I also was massively influenced by Aristotle and the ideas that Aristotle puts together in metaphysics. are still true today. And what I particularly like about Aristotle is that he goes about proving the existence of a cognizant, conscious God. And he also, while doing that, like disproves any other argument, and I kind of like that as well. I'm not saying that you can't find proofs against it now and this and that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he does a really good job of proving it, and with combine that with my actual experiences with various spirits, then I know that there is a God. So that's the crux of my belief system, is I believe there's a God. 100%. I am one. And Osho talked about, who's had a pseudo Buddhist / Hindu religion, became really popular in the 1980s. But Osho talked about belief. You shouldn't believe, you should know. And I actually buy into that, and Crowley gets into that a bit as well. But I buy that. I believe what I see. I believe what I feel. And, that actually reminds me of a Rush song, the band Rush. But anyway, I've seen things, and I believe what I've seen. And people might ask, well, how does that stack up with the Dia stuff that you've read? And the real simple answer to that is that God, as it is, to say that God created, and this is where the actual beliefs come into play. So I've given you the background of why and how I got to these beliefs, but this is how I believe. God, per se, you didn't really create the universe. It's not like in the Bible where God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and it was good. I don't believe that happened. I believe that there may be a correlation to light, and that light may be a very good description of what God is, if you will. But I don't believe that God just waved his magic wand and boom, you have the universe. I don't believe that's how it happened. And I don't believe that God's consciousness is anything like what our consciousness is. And I think that our consciousness exists in a level, and one of the other influences on me is science, in physics. And I believe that there are multiple universes and multiple dimensions of universe, and we are very limited. And even if you just add a fourth dimension being time, then that changes how we look at things, because time, if it's just another dimension, is the same as if you didn't have width, or you didn't have height, or depth, or any of those kinds of things. If you didn't have that, if you were in a two-dimensional reality and not a three-dimensional reality, then time would those other ones would react like time does to us. Whereas in a fourth dimensional state, the beginning of time, the end of time, because it is just like another dimension, and it moves forward just like that. Now, we can't think of that. We can't understand that because we are in the third dimension. But I believe that there are other dimensions, and I believe that there are other levels of creation. And God, and I use quotes because calling it God is a man-made idea, and the idea that it is some big thing above us. That's not true in my belief. None of that is true. It is It is simply part of it all. And does that, it's like looking at a tree. And I'm going to use the tree, not the tree of life from the Kabbalah, just a tree, as a very good example of how existence tends to work. And I think that existence, it still follows the laws of nature. And a tree is a very good representation of that nature and of that flow of nature. So like a tree, you have bits and pieces. You have roots that go down, you have branches that go up, and each and every one of those branches are part of that tree, and they are individual pieces of that tree. But you also have the tree as a whole. And now, obviously, that tree exists in all of nature and what have you. I'm just using the example. So if you think of God as the tree, he is every single thing that is reality. And that means every single thing that ever has been, every single thing that ever will be, things that we can't even fathom, the ideas of another dimension. Science and physics have postulated that there might be 11 different dimensions. I think once we get there, we will find that that is infinite, that there are an infinite amount of dimensions and infinite amounts of possibilities of reality. And God is that infinity. And I do believe in my core that that has a consciousness. It is a consciousness that makes choices. It is a consciousness that moves in a particular pattern, but it's not one that we understand because we are just in the third dimension. And I believe that maybe someday we will progress past that. So in that infinite oneness that is God, the universe, when things are being created, and you can say God created the universe, and to a degree you'd be right in that it's everything, so it creating everything would be God creating the universe. But it's more like thinking of the Big Bang and the expansion of all things. And within that expansion of all things, you have many dimensions that develop consciousness. And consciousnesses, once we get to our understanding, that we can more understand, that we can get to. And we think that we are the center of the universe, and we're just not. We are one piece of the universe, and if you consider even what physics is postulating being 6 to 11 dimensions, we are almost insignificant in the scope of things. At the best, if there are only 6 dimensions, then we're half. We're half of that. And even if you say that's all bunk and there's only 3 dimensions and that's all that there is, and the physical reality is all that we know, this three-dimensional world, this universe is infinite and there is a lot in it. So we are insignificant as that. Now, that being said, I believe that the whole universe is fractal. Fractal is an idea of primarily art, where when you look at a piece of fractal art, or you look at fractals that appear in nature, such as a tree, it is the idea that no matter where you look, no matter how big, like if you look at the wholeness of it, if you look at the bigness of a fractal, it looks identical than if you narrow down to a very small part. Like if you look at the very small little piece over here, they look identical. And if you think about a tree, it's very similar. When a tree grows, if you took a little branch, let's say the tree doesn't have leaves, if you took a branch off of that tree and put it in the ground and messed with the view, you could make that branch look like a tree. It doesn't look like a branch off of a tree. It looks like a tree because it's fractal. And nature likes to work in fractals. It likes to expand in those kinds of ways. And I think that the universe is fractal. So you can look at and then it comes down to the Hermetic idea of as above, so below. That the big things also are similar to the little things. So if we look at that, and if the above and the below are essentially the same, and then we are God experiencing himself in any particular moment. So what does all this philosophy have to do with voodoo? Well, one, I got a lot of this from them. I got a lot of it from the Loa, from the voodoo gods. And these are some of the things that they've taught me, especially Legba, the storyteller in the voodoo pantheon, who ultimately is God, is the totality of everything in voodoo mythology. Many people say that all Legba, that everything is Legba, and that all of the other Loa, and for that matter, all of other things, are just a story that Legba has told. And I like that analogy. But these Loa are real. I've experienced them. They typically move through possession. They take over somebody's body and they talk, and it is obvious that they're not just somebody being full of crap and talking about things. They've done things and said things that, if I'm the horse, which is the person being ridden, um, then I don't know. Then there's no way for me to know. And you can make an argument, well, maybe you're psychic, and what you're doing is you're reading people's minds. And okay, I don't care. If that's how it works, then that's how it works. I don't care. Because then it's the same outcome. At the end of the day, the same thing happens. And I lose what I feel is just my consciousness to that level. So what makes this voluntary? Well, for one, many times in voodoo, there's the idea of either, and it tends to flow both ways. Either you have paid off the Loa and you're in charge and you're making them do something, and then this works in many other magical setups and philosophies as well, or they tell you what to do and they're in charge and they make you do some things. My experience has been that's not the case. I might ask. I might say, just like I would ask a friend, who I'm close to, hey, could you do this for me? I can do the same thing with the law. Hey, could you do this for me? And they might say, yeah, but I'm gonna need some stuff, because what you're asking requires some psychic power or whatever. So what I'm gonna need you to do is focus on that. I'm gonna need you to take your psychic power and focus down on it. And how you might do that is by lighting a candle, or you might do that by doing this particular ritual, or you might do that by doing these. It is simply you focusing your energy and giving them that energy so that you can acquire whatever it is you need. Sometimes it doesn't require any energy. They're like, okay, we can take care of it. Good to go. Also, one of the things that the Loa have said to me is that all they are capable of doing is pushing. The Legba describes reality as being a stream. He likes to use the Mississippi River, and he said if you start up where the Mississippi River starts, and your goal is to never leave the Mississippi, that you will eventually, one way or the other, wind up in New Orleans. Does not matter. You're going to flow down. You continue to move down there. You're going to get there. You might get off the boat and you might go visit St. Louis. You might get off the boat and do whatever. But if you stay on that boat and you get on that stream, you are going to make it to New Orleans sooner or later. Now, maybe you'll die and float there, float down the river till you get there, but you will eventually get there because all things that are on the Mississippi River flow down to New Orleans. And he basically has said that there is a flow in the universe, that there are things that are going to happen. And all they can do is maybe take the boat and push it to the left, push it to the right. Maybe they can help you avoid a rough patch. Let's say if you go this fork down, then you're going to run into some rapids, and let's go down here. And or maybe you want to force somebody else to go down one of those. Which I would advise against. Again, I'm a voluntarist. I don't believe in force and violence. So, but that's on you. So, where I break with traditional voodoo theology is the idea, like I used to use the term master of the head, and I don't like using that anymore. And that referred to a particular Loa that is associated with you. And for me, the primary, and I think that sometimes there's more than one. For me, there's three. The primary one for me is G'day, the Loa of death and dance and sex. He's a great guy. So I will eventually cover him. But he doesn't master me. He's not dictating my every move. And he might say, hey, I wouldn't do that. Ooh, you did that. Okay, well, it is what it is. But he guides, and my nature to some degree. And Only really because the other two come out for most of y'all. For most of you guys, you see it's the other two that I have heavily influencing me are Shingo, who's actually a Santeria Risha, Shingo, the king god, and Damballa, the master of truth and purity. And for many of you, and knowledge and things like that. So many people see that side of me. They don't see the G'day in me. My wife sees the G'day in me constantly because I like to make a lot of jokes. But just as an example, I do have a degree, and that degree is in funeral service, and so that's been kind of an important part of my life, including my spirituality. I may at some point make videos on it, but. But anyhow, I don't believe that any of these spirits, who I do believe are just a fractal, they're just another layer different than our layer, maybe. And I don't even know if they're smaller or bigger. I don't even know. I don't, because when you look at a fractal, it doesn't matter where you look at it. It looks like it could be the whole. So anyhow, they're just a different fractal, and they exist in a different state of being. And so that's what I think the Loa are. It's just another piece that desire, and I do think they desire, as do archangels, as do demons to some degree, and devils. They're actively trying to work with us in one way or another. And you can say, well, demons are trying to work against us. I've seen demons work for us. I've seen angels work against us. I think that that it is about perspective and what they do and how they react, and probably a different level of fractal. So it's not that I believe God created, and I've used those words before. God created these things to help us out. I don't actually believe that. I believe they're just a different level of consciousness, and they choose. It's kind of like if you think of animals as lesser beings than us, and I don't actually, but let's say you do, and you want to take care of a dog, okay? Now you can't really communicate. You might learn to be able to kind of, they'll get words here and there, don't sit, stand, but you're not going to sit and go, so how was your day today, Fido? And Fido going to be, oh, I had an awful day. I ate some cat shit. It was not good cat shit. That you're not going to have that kind of conversation with Fido. More than likely. Maybe somebody does. I don't. And in my reality, that's the way it works. So, but that dog might want to help you, and you might want to help the dog. And you can work out a cooperative situation. And what you give the dog is food, caring, so it makes the dog a little bit easier. Maybe it's injured, you hurt it, and you help it to heal, whatever it is your relationship with your dog is. But it's a very similar, I think, way of dealing with all of these different spirits. And so when I approach these spirits, I approach them like a friend or like a family member. If I'm really close to them, like G'day or Damballa, and frankly, like Ogun and I are really close. He's not, as connected to me as the others, but I like Ogun, and Ogun's god of war, which is funny because he's actually not all that warlike. My friend Adam Kokesh recently put a video out talking about the difference between a warrior and a soldier, and Ogun's a warrior. He's not a soldier. He's trying to act to do what's right, and sometimes that does require violence. But he actually preaches about peace, and told me particularly that I need to make my activism about being anti-war, and about being about bringing the ideas that war is murder to the world. Not that I'm the first person to say that. Dozens of people have, but I need to make that important in my personal activism, which I have. But these are more like friends. They aren't kings. They aren't people that control your life. And I don't believe that God does that. I don't believe that God controls your life. And I don't believe that that does all that. So the question might arise, why? Why do you do this? If you don't really believe that they're in charge, and you're not trying to get to some heaven place, and you're not trying to keep away from smell place, because I don't believe in any of that. Are you trying to have some kind of better? Do you believe in reincarnation? I don't flippin' know. Not really. I have ideas, and I will grant you they're a little bit more um, educated ideas of what happens in the afterlife, but I think the afterlife is afterlife. And it's not about what's here, and focusing so much on what happens after here takes away the point. To me, the reason that you want to have these entities in your life is to make a fuller life, to have an understanding of what you're doing. They're helpful, and plus I think we help them. I think that by focusing on them, and by we're talking about any kind of energy. This doesn't have to be voodoo loa essentially, only. It can be, Isis, it can be Krishna, it can be Jesus, whoever the spirits are, who, because Jesus functions for most people much like the Loa function for me. And to me, he's just another Loa. But so, and you can make arguments. Well, he was man before, and this and that. So was Shingo, and half the gods in any pantheon were men sometimes, or women. So okay, you're special. You want to feel special, great. I don't care. So so anyway, the purpose of working with the Loa is to achieve greater understanding of the universe, and to try to enact some kind of control over your life. To try, and I'm not talking about like I want to be able to fly, and I want to, no, control, like, don't get me wrong. I think that you can get to that, and I think that those things are possible. I just think that takes so much time and so much effort for something that really doesn't matter, that you've wasted your time. And I could tell an old Hindu story that other people have heard a billion times. But the point is that you can waste your time and focus down the energy that's required to do those things, but that's kind of stupid. What is not stupid is trying to become a better person, trying to use your understanding of the entire universe to do something positive with your life. And that moving into doing something positive with your life could be, loving your children better. It could be growing a better garden. It could be those things. For me, um, I've become active in trying to set people free. And I think that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know that I do it well. I don't know that I'm all that effective. But I have been, in my universe, placed in a position to try. And I'm the press secretary for Adam Kokesh as he runs for president. And there are people within the anarchist community that don't like Adam. I don't care. I do. I like Adam. He's a good person. And people say, oh, but he's trying to rule people because he's trying to run for president. No, he's giving you the option of none of the above. He's giving you, I'm going to end the federal government and become a bankruptcy agent. That's a little different than I want the ring of power, which most other candidates want. And as an anarchist, I respect that. And so I think that Adam's heart is in the right place. And so therefore my activism is helping his at this time. If something changed, then I would change. And I don't see that happening because, again, I think Adam's heart's in the right place. I think he's made mistakes. I think he continues to make mistakes. Which one of us hasn't? This idea that we're perfect is kind of the point. We're not. And with the help of the Loa or these different spirits, we can try to be better and try to do whatever it is that we plan on doing. This has come back to Thelema and the idea in Crowley's philosophy, the idea that we're here for a reason. And we may never know that reason. I think that Crowley's idea that you find it and then you do that, I don't know about all that. I think it changes. I think that your purpose is just as based on everyday events as it is a plan. Back to the idea of Legba, I do think there might be an overarching idea, but I think it's really big and it's really vague. Like, for instance, let's say that my purpose in life is to help spread freedom. Let's say, well, I'm going to help spread freedom. I've made videos. I get Adam interviews all the time. So I've done that. That's been done. So maybe that big idea is handled. So I don't think that it's this pointed thing. So anyway, but that's what I believe. I believe, and just to put it all into one thing, I believe that there is a God, that God has consciousness, that we do not understand that consciousness, that the universe is fractal, and that anywhere you look at it will look like what is above or below. It looks the same. And that we should act as if we're in charge of our own lives, even if there is some kind of formula, because what the hell else difference does it make? And I do believe that there are spirits that are functioning out there, and some of these spirits are called people, but that there are spirits out there in this universe, in this dimension, in this reality, or another, who can help us to achieve our goals, make our lives better, and be better people. And I don't believe in the initiation of force. I don't believe that you, God, or anybody else has the right to demand that you do anything. And in practice, so there's a theory, and I'm going to try to wrap this up relatively quickly, but in practice, what I do is I use methods of magic. I create a sacred space, loosely in the form that a lot of Wiccans or ceremonial magicians do. I use a lot of voodoo stuff when I'm doing it. If I'm gonna call quarters, which I don't always, but let's say we're gonna call quarters, which are elemental spirits, I'm probably gonna call a voodoo loa. And so I start drums are a huge part of what I do, and I find a lot of meditative goodness, if you will, in drumming. I find that I can lose, my everyday life in the actions of just drumming. And so I use relatively traditional beads. I got them from Lou Martinet, who is a friend of mine from New Orleans, who passed along in a confirmation ceremony. I got them all, and I don't share them with anybody that's around. But anyway, I use drums, and then we call down the loa, and they take over somebody and they talk. And when I say take over, it's not very violent. People are, I have not had much violent. The most violent thing that's ever happened with possession for me is, G'day used to think it was hilarious to because G'day thinks lots of things are hilarious, I'd be walking along as G'day, I'm possessed. Oh, yeah, I'm G'day, blah, and he'd just leave. I'd fall down, bash my head on the ground. Now, I was never hurt. I have never been hurt. Not one time have I ever felt pain. And people have seen my head bounce off concrete. Never have I been hurt. And people are like, well, that explains it. Your head's been bounced on concrete. Okay. But I've never been hurt by any of this. But he doesn't do it anymore. And the reason he doesn't do it anymore is because my friends, including my wife, years ago, were like, okay, this has got to stop. This is scaring the piss out of us. Dropping Mark, I'm afraid he's going to get hurt. So what I want is they made a deal with G'day to not drop me anymore. He didn't drop me anymore. It is. So anyway, that's what the most violent thing that they've ever done. Can they? Certainly. Just like us, the Voodoo Loa have good points and bad points, and some of them lend themselves to being bad. I could do a whole lecture on it, but there's lots of books written on it, and it wouldn't be different. And Voluntary Voodoo is different because there is no central authority. There is no, Legba, as much as viewing him as the whole, does not act like a king, does not act like a ruler, does not act like somebody who is in charge. He'll tell you a story, and maybe you pay attention to that story, maybe you don't, but he's not in charge. I'm not in charge of my ceremonies. We don't have rulers. Does that mean we don't have rules? No. You've missed the point of anarchy. It's not about not having rules. It's not about chaos. It's about that we don't believe in rulers. We do not believe in kings. We do not believe that somebody who's been given some title has authority over your life. You have authority over your life, and no God or government has a right, again going to Rush, Tom Sawyer, has a right to tell you how to live your life. Now you start messing with other people, comes into the non-aggression principle. Don't hurt, don't steal. It's really simple. Don't lie to people. Be nice. These are the kind. Then this isn't like a rule set in a rule book. This is, if you don't do that, you will get negative consequences. If you are not nice to people, you won't be liked by people, and you will be ostracized by society. It is really, really simple. You want to go kill somebody? I guarantee your little tribe, or your little group, or community are going to come together. We don't want him to do that again, and they're going to do something about that. Now, maybe what it depends on where they're at and how they do it. So the spirituality is the exact same process. It's exactly the same. There's no king. There's no boss. There are people that know some shit. There are people that know, or spirits that know some things that you don't know. So they're good to talk to, because you don't know that. So how do you get to know that? You talk to them. It's decentralized. That's voluntary voodoo. So this is my video on voluntary voodoo. If you've liked it, please like, share, comment. I'd love to make new ideas. For those of you that primarily follow Aquarian Anarchy because of the political stuff we talk about, sorry, this one's about spirituality. For those of you that primarily follow us for spiritual ideas and stuff, well, here you go. This is one for you. Tomorrow I might make a video that talks about political stuff. That's why we're here, because we need to talk about religion and politics, and this is me talking about religion. Thank you very much. Oh, visit my store where you can get some t-shirts and help my production along, because it takes money, and I would like to get better lighting, better stuff, better camera, those kinds of things. The only way I can do that is with money, and I don't have that much money. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Be free. Stay free. Love your neighbors and be a good person.